Spider-Man No Way Home has been unleashed to the entire world, and so has Hawkeye's. Hawkeye's coming to a close. No Way Home is officially out. It's time to dive in and rank all 32 MCU properties. Everything that came out this year, everything that came out the year before, we're ranking them from worst to best. But the most important part about this, guys, is getting your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. So make sure to leave your ranking down there, as well as making sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Because if you love movies, if you love talking TV, or in general, you're just a geek like me, you are in the right place. So it's time to dive in and rank all the MCU movies from worst to best. Oh, coming down at my number 32, well, this hasn't changed. It's Thor 2, Thor the Dark World. This movie just really never intrigues me. It's the one movie on any rewatch, it's the one I kind of groan and moan about going back and watching it, because for me, it has some of the most important aspects of, especially when it gets to Endgame, anything with the Infinity Stones, as well as Loki and Thor's relationship. But on the entire sphere of that all, I also just really don't care about this movie. It's very dull in its atmosphere, and especially in a lot of its settings. I like the more magical element of this movie, but it's not one that I totally love going back to and rewatching. Where it brings me to my number 31, which many people will disagree with me on this one. The first Thor as well. Kenneth Branagh is an excellent director, and I actually think everything in Asgard is fantastic in this movie. But since most of the movie takes place on Earth, that's where it leaves its lackluster. And honestly, 31 and up, I do enjoy all these movies to love them. It's just when I come down to rewatching, the first Thor just never really is my cup of tea. I think there's some excellent filmmaking stuff in here. It is entertaining overall, and it did make Chris Hemsworth a star. But I'm in the camp where I like Thor more when he's in a team, less than when he's in his own solo movies. And that's where it brings me to my number 30, and that is going to be Iron Man 2. Now, are we surprised by this one? This is very much a mess when it comes down to the story, the plotting, and all the sorts of details leading up to the Avengers. It's very much rushed into development, and you can truly tell that, especially within its villains. Thankfully, though, at least one of the villains, Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell, is exquisite and awesome, and I'm hoping one day we can get him back. But other than that, I think this movie is entertaining for what it is. I do think the final action sequence between Rhodey and Iron Man going up against all the other drones and droids and all sorts of things like that is heavily entertaining. And I do like the distinguishedness and the character arc that we end up getting within Tony Stark himself. I find this movie interesting, I find it entertaining, but is it a greatly made movie and one of the ones I love going back to? No. And coming down to my number 29 is one of the more underrated ones. This movie always hits the bottom of people's lists, like the very, very bottom. I don't get it. It might be still close to the bottom, but I enjoy this one every time I come around to it, and I enjoy it more on each rewatch, and that is The Incredible Hulk, starring our original Bruce Banner, Edward Norton, who I thought did an excellent job in this movie. I freaking loved him as Edward Norton, and I still love Mark Ruffalo's Hulk and Bruce Banner. There are just definitely two different iterations here, and for me, what Edward Norton brought to this role really much fit, and it feels like this is that in-between. Which way did Marvel want to go? The more serious and dramatic route, or the more comedic route like Iron Man? Incredible Hulk's like that weird uncle that you never want to talk to, but he is a part of your family. But not in the best way. Like, they're still entertaining to be around. I find that to be what is here. I'm excited to see what they do with Abomination later on. Maybe it'll even bump the movie up, because Abomination versus Hulk is still one of the most fun fight scenes that we have in the MCU. At my number 28, it might be one of the movies that I was so excited for, and I'm definitely more excited for the sequel, but that is Captain Marvel. I think Brie Larson's great in the role, and I think, again, just like Thor, she works better as a team. When she is placed with Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury through a majority of this movie, that is when the film is really working. But when she's more on her own or with those other members that were a lot like her, that is when the movie really drags in its pacing and just doesn't feel like the Marvel film that I was looking forward to. I think she very much embodies who Captain Marvel is from the comics, and I'm excited to see what she does next in the Marvels, because I think she will be great in there. And my number 27 was actually one of my most anticipated shows for this year, and if you would have told me, Zach, this is going to be your least favorite Phase 4 show so far, I would tell you you're crazy. But The Falcon and Winter Soldier just didn't do it for me. I love the thematics of this. I love seeing Sam Wilson really much in what his thought process is of taking up the shield and what it means for all of America. I think there's so many thought-provoking things in there, especially with the conversations he has with one of the other Captain Americas as well, that also had the super serum. There are interesting elements in there that I wish they would have explored a little bit deeper. Sadly, though, the movie is plotted with so many characters, so many different avenues, that by the ending of the show, I just didn't really feel anything. I did really dig US Agent, and I actually think in the end of the day, this show should have just been a movie. Thankfully, though, Anthony Mackie is getting his own Captain America movie, which he wholeheartedly deserves. Now we move right up to my number 26, which is What If. Now, Marvel Studios' What If has some of the best elements of Marvel and also some of the weakest. I really want to just talk more about the positives, because episode 4, if I was just ranking episode 4 with Doctor Strange, this would have been way higher. I think What If is a really intriguing concept and a fun one at that. I'm looking forward to what they do with season 2, because I think they're going to be able to go even crazier. But some of the episodes in here really much drag this one down, where this is one of the only few Marvel shows, or even a few Marvel properties, that I don't see myself truly going back and rewatching the entire season. Maybe select episodes I will, but definitely I'm looking forward to see how this does tie into the canon of MCU. And at my number 25, it is Thor Ragnarok. Now, I want to love this movie. Every time I go and watch it, first time I watched it, I really liked it. But there was something about me inside that just didn't feel right about the movie. And then I saw it again and I'm like, I really think this is so entertaining. I just don't care. And it sucks because I know a lot of you guys are raising your pitchforks right now saying, how dare you hate Thor Ragnarok? I don't hate it. I find it entertaining. Absolutely drag down the emotional avenues that this film should have. This should be one of the darkest stories for Thor yet, and it sadly does not. That's where we bring me to my number 24, which is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Same thing as Thor Ragnarok. So much fun. So entertaining. But again, when it comes down to the actual emotional parts of the story, I just never feel like it's as strong there. For me, the biggest standout of this entire movie is Wasp herself, Angeline Lilly. I think she's incredible in there. I can't wait to see what they do with her in the next Ant-Man movie. She's going to do some awesome things in there. And of course, it is Paul Rudd playing Ant-Man, and there are some fun elements in there. This is just a very entertaining movie that, again, I don't see myself going back to too often, but anytime it's on TV and I'm flipping through, I absolutely leave it on for some of my favorite moments throughout that entire movie. That's where we bring me to my number 23, and I'm sure some of you guys are about to raise those pitchforks again. But that's the Avengers. I loved this movie when it first came out in theaters, and in fact, I saw this movie like 26 times in theaters. I'm not even joking. Like, we would go I went like 4 times opening weekend, and went like every week after that, and ever since then, I've seen this movie so many times. The thing with this, though, is, as we've gotten the other Avengers movies, this movie has fallen lower and lower on my ranking because of the spectacle of it all. Yes, I miss having these characters and their banter, and that's why I really like Avengers Age of Ultron, because it doubles down on that even more. But now we have Infinity War, Endgame, and the spectacle of seeing all these heroes. Now we have even more heroes to jump into. Don't get me wrong, the first Avengers I still absolutely love, even if I think it has pacing issues, especially in the middle of the film, but this is exactly what the MCU was holding up to, and the fact that now we're at the point where we have talking raccoons, talking trees, and even other crazy characters, it's insane to me, but I love it. Now, my number 22, it is Captain America: The First Avenger, a movie that honestly, this is the one film I actually never saw in theaters. Out of all the MCU films, it's the one. And it sucks because I think it's great. I think it's one of the more underrated origin stories when it comes down to the entirety of the MCU. I do find it gets a little bit montagey towards the end, and I think they should have just doubled down and went more with the runtime and actually given it that fleshed out piece. But God, Steve Rogers, Chris Evans, what perfect casting that was. Easy enough, Hugo Weaving is completely underrated as the Red Skull. I wish we would have gotten more of him. No, we ended up getting some more of Red Skull with an Endgame and Infinity War, but it wasn't played by Hugo Weaving. Still, Ross did a really good job of that, but the first Captain America is entertaining. It's an emotional story, and in a sense, this whole Phase 1 movies, they're just the start. They birthed what the MCU is nowadays, and without those, we wouldn't have the films that we all love and adore. And at my number 21, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. I know many people think this is the weakest Avengers movie. I think it's just on par with the first Avengers, if I'm being honest, because I don't think this one has pacing issues. I think this one moves way faster, has some even better action sequences throughout it, and even doubles down and brings some more dramatic avenues, and even cementing the seeds for what Captain America Civil War was going to bring us. But it is also really messy at times, with especially all the different storylines it's trying to set up. It's trying to set up Thor Ragnarok. It's trying to set up this movie. It's trying to set up this movie. And it even kind of erases Iron Man 3 in a sense, which sucks because I actually think Iron Man 3 is underrated. Oh God, raise the pitchforks once again, because every time I do a ranking and I say that, people flip out. Ultron is good. I really like Ultron as a villain. And let's move to the next one. And speaking of the hate, Iron Man 3 is next. I love this. It's more about the man under the armor. Who is Tony Stark? That is what we get in this movie. And I really find this movie to be intriguing in every single way. In the way that it really much develops Tony Stark as a character. And even in general, how he really is an Iron Man for a majority of this movie. Now, the Mandarin twist, I think, has kind of been saved a little bit more for me, especially with what they do in Shang-Chi, but I understand the problems that people had during that, because this is definitely more of a Shane Black movie than it is an MCU movie, and it's actually one of the last MCU movies that really just have that director's flair. There is one or two other movies in here that do have that actual director style, and we'll talk about those soon, but Iron Man 3, it's entertaining, it is a Christmas movie. I just wish we would have gotten more director styles like this from Shane Black. At number 19, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, I really like this one. I think any movie above and up here, I could rewatch any day and have a ton of fun with. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, awesome soundtrack, really dig Ego, and I think Kurt Russell does it to such a high standard, and I love Star-Lord and his development in here. I think this movie, while again, has that comedic issue where it's any comedic point you have in here, sometimes a little bit too harsh and brass, and it kind of takes away from some of the dramatic avenues, but even then, the dramatic avenues can truly hit hard in here, whether it's Ego and his dad, Nebula and Gamora, Rocket and Groot, or even Drax and, of course, Mantis. All of those elements mix and work well at times, plus it's just a gorgeous film. It's not as good as the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's definitely, I've not viewed this one as many times as I had that first one, but I still really love the Guardians, and I can't wait to see what James Gunn does with the third film. Number 18 is the brand new show, Hawkeye. Now, Hawkeye, for me, I feel like just needed a couple more episodes to really develop everything learned here. Now, don't get me wrong, we might get, I know we're getting Echo, and I know we're getting a couple other shows down the road that maybe develops a couple other things within Hawkeye, and I still haven't even seen the finale, so I mean, that is something to be said. But as it comes down to that, I just don't feel that everything is going to be completely caught up and developed. Again, this is TV, so anything can change in this avenue. I am loving Hawkeye to such a high standard, especially because of Kate Bishop and Clint Barton and their relationship. Plus, my God, they're bringing back Vincent D'Onofrio as Hawkeye, as Kingpin, and I love that they're doing that. Hawkeye is very engaging. It's also based off the Matt Fraction run, which is one of the best Hawkeye comics ever, so definitely don't miss that out. Moving up next, we have Ant-Man. Yes, one of the more underrated solo films in the MCU. Heist junkie, so of course I'm going to love what Ant-Man's going to give us. And Paul Rudd, what a casting that was. I truly don't have really any problems with this movie. It's small-scaled, it's fun. I actually really like Yellow Jacket as a villain, and some of the most memorable action sequences are in here. I mean, Thomas the Tank Engine, am I right? Now let's jump over to my number 16, which is also one of the films that birthed the MCU, and in fact, it was the film that really made what the MCU is nowadays, and that is Iron Man. I love what Jon Favreau did with this. What an origin story. Iron Man was never one of the heroes that I truly followed as a kid, but after this, I went back and dove into so many of his comics. It really inspired me to really jive back in and reinvigorate my love for comic books. But Iron Man, what perfect casting it was for Robert Downey Jr. I still contend to this day that we will get more of him eventually down the road. In general, just looking at this movie, what a great standout it was, and seriously one of the best MCU films ever. In a sense, this film changed what the comic book genre is today. Jumping into my number 15, this movie kind of switches back and forth with Iron Man quite a bit, but right now it is Doctor Strange. God damn, what a cool movie this was. I still can't believe we've been waiting this long for a sequel, but anytime Doctor Strange shows up, I'm so excited, and I can't wait for Multiverse of Madness because I love this original Doctor Strange movie. I do think the villain of here is completely, it sucks because Mads Mikkelsen does such a great job, but there is no development, no real substantial element to that villain, but other than that, I love what Mads Mikkelsen does in this role, and I also just love Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. The Ancient One is great. All those aspects with all the trippy, atmospheric, and really much diving into the more of not the cosmic realm, but the magic realm of the MCU, and that is what is really opening up the door. That has opened up so many different doors now with Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and again, whatever we get with Multiverse of Madness. And now coming out my number 14, it is Spider-Man Homecoming. God, was I so excited for this when it first was announced that we were getting Spider-Man in the MCU. While I was sad to hear Andrew Garfield was not going to be returning, we get Tom Holland, who absolutely embodies Peter Parker in so many different ways. Being my favorite superhero of all time, I was very biased going into this movie, but I was truly also worried. And thankfully, I was not. I was like, I love this fresher breath air that we're getting from the MCU Spider-Man. We've already had Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, but now we're getting him more inclined within the MCU. And while yes, I would like a lot of my characters to kind of have their own stories and developments, I'm happy the way that Homecoming really much developed everything, and I love what Tom Holland does in this role. Plus, Michael Keaton as the Vulture was like perfect casting. I've never liked the Vulture as a character in the comics, but they made me love him here, and I love how this feels like a John Hughes film. We still have 13 different MCU properties to continue talking about today, guys, so make sure, again, if you guys are new here and you are a geek like me, to hit that like and subscribe button so I can keep talking movies with you guys on a daily basis, as well as comment down below your guys' overall thoughts. What are your ranking? Do you guys agree with mine? It's my opinion, but we can disagree and have some fun down below in the comment section. I can't wait to see your guys' thoughts. So now at my number 13 is the brand new released Black Widow, which I found to be very underrated. So many people trashed on this movie, and I'm like, why? I've seen it 4 or 5 times now, and I can't get enough of it. I love the new introduction of Yelena, Red Guardian, and Melinda, her mom, and of course just Black Widow opening up her doors, her past, and seeing all those elements. It is stunning what they were able to do here, and I was thoroughly impressed with every development that they were able to bring inside this movie, and even adding in there a little tad bit more. While I do think this film was a little bit too late, on rewatches when you're doing your MCU when you're doing your MCU rewatch, this is going to be a great one to piece right before Civil War. It adds much needed development for Black Widow. I wish we would have just gotten more of Scarlett Johansson, because now, you know, she's dead in the MCU, but I love this movie so much. I loved it. It was so different. I guess the only other con I do have is I do hate that the third act was so explosion, and I wish it was more tight to the ground like the first 2 acts were, but still, what a damn great film. Now, my number 12, it is going to be Captain America Civil War. I mean, who knew that this movie was just going to be awesome in so many different ways? I still contend that the airport scene is not the best action scene in here. While it's delightful and fun, I hate that all the heroes are like pulling their punches in a sense. But even though they brought it to life and still made this a Captain America-centric story, they did a really good job of bringing both sides to life. Which side were you? Iron Man or Captain America? Yeah, you might love your favorite heroes on one side or the other, but you still had pros and cons to either or, and I love it because it did divide the fan base in a fun way, as well as introducing 2 of the most iconic characters in the MCU now, Spider-Man and Black Panther. Spider-Man's introduction, I mean, made me cry, and Black Panther was freaking badass. Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, man. You were so freaking good in this. I love Civil War for what it is, even if I still feel like I wanted it to be a little bit more hard-hitting and punches at certain points. This is a really fun movie to watch, and I always like going back to it, especially with the way that the Russo brothers film the action in here. And at my number 11, we have WandaVision. WandaVision. Yeah, this probably would be in my top 5 if it wasn't for the finale. I have a lot of issues with the finale of this show, but God, if the rest of it is not perfection for me, especially as you binge it. I love how different this show is in just the first 3 episodes, and they don't care. They're like, just take it. This is what WandaVision is. If you have a problem with it, oh well. And I love how the show really much develops that in so many different ways. It's incredible performances from Paul Bettany, WandaVision herself, of course, Elizabeth Olsen as well, and even looking Agatha all along. I mean, look at Agatha Harkness and Catherine Hahn's performance. This was such a top-tier show. And even though, again, I don't totally hate the finale, I guess, I just was really let down with the Ralph Boner stuff. I thought that joke was stupid. And even though it also felt a little bit rushed, I feel like there was a lot more they wanted to do here. Plus, we finally got introduced to Monica Rambeau, which was top tier. My number 10, though, and we're getting into those top 10s, it is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. How impressed was I with this? A lot. I didn't know really anything going into Shang-Chi. I read a couple comics like leading up to the week of my screener for this, and I've seen the movie 4 times, and I can't get enough of it. Easily probably some of the best action we've ever seen in the MCU, if not the best hand-to-hand combat we have seen in the MCU, as well as the father-son story here. There really is no antagonist here, because Wenwu has his own developments. In a sense, he is the second protagonist of this entire film, right next to Shang-Chi himself, which Simu Liu does such an incredible job in this role. Awkwafina, I thought she was going to annoy me. I've really started to come to like her more as an actress, and in here she was great. Everyone, every single performance is amazing in here. The action is great. I have almost 0 issues with this movie. Maybe a couple pacing issues here and there with some of the flashbacks, but God, is Shang-Chi such an awesome film. And at my number 9, this is a film that has actually risen on my list the last couple of weeks, especially on subsequent rewatches, and that is Eternals. Now, I mentioned director standpoints and really much making a film feel like that director. This feels like a Chloe Zhao film. In a good way, because I love Chloe Zhao as a director. I loved her film No Man's Land. I loved all those sorts of instances, and I love seeing what she was able to do with the Eternals, and I hope to God we actually get more of these characters. I'm sure we will, the way that this movie ended, but I need it now, because it was incredible the way that Chloe Zhao brought it to life. I know this movie is not for everyone, and I understand if you have issues with the pacing, if you have issues with the story and the way that they have this jumbled up story from the past, the present, the future, all sorts of things like that. I get it. But it worked for me in every single way. I knew nothing about the Eternals. Instead, again, read a couple comics leading up, and it brought those characters to life in so many different ways, and even some in better ways. Of almost every single character: Druig, Makari, Icarus, Cersei, Ajax, I mean, Phastos. I could go on for hours talking about how each and every character is such a big standout in here. And I also loved how it furthered out the cosmic realm of the MCU in so many definitive ways. It makes everything seem so small to comparing to how big scaled this story is and the stakes of it all. This is such a different, unique MCU film, and I can't emphasize enough. Give this film an open try if you still haven't seen it, especially the way that Chloe Zhao really handles this movie. It is very unique for me. And at my number 8 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I love this movie, man. When I went to see this opening weekend, it was such a packed, crowded theater. And I remember sitting there and like half the theater was shocked when Bucky unveiled the mask. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's Bucky. I'm like, did no one else know that? But besides that, the reveal was great. The action before Shang-Chi, this would have been the best hand-to-hand combat action sequences in the entire MCU yet. The Russo brothers came right out of Community and said, hey, we can make an MCU movie, and they absolutely did. I have so much fun with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and I can't get enough of this film. If you still, like, if for some reason this one doesn't work for you, I understand, but the fact that it was such a throwback to political thrillers makes me so happy. And God, now I'm sad that we don't get any more Chris Evans. And my number 7, it is Avengers Infinity War. Now, I freaking love this movie. The action, the pacing, it all just moves at such a fast pace. Now, while the story is kind of lacking in certain departments, because it's very much, we just got to get the stones and stop Thanos, the stakes, the moments, and even if you saw this in theaters with a great audience, the audience reaction to Thor coming into Wakanda to save their asses is some of the best theater experiences that I've ever had in my entire life, and probably will always be so memorable in that moment. I love this film. All the action is top tier, especially everything with Doctor Strange and Iron Man and Spider-Man's group, especially with the way they work with the Guardians. This movie had the stakes, and it had such a jaw-dropping ending that even though I knew, obviously, everyone's going to come back, sitting in the theater, and this older lady next to me turns to me, and she heard me and my friends talking about the movie. She goes, please tell me there's another one. And it was great to tell her, yes, there is. They filmed them back to back. Do you not worry. They're going to be back soon. And it was awesome to tell her that and just experience that with such a crowded theater. I love Infinity War. I could literally rewatch this any day just to watch any sort of action sequence in here, because it just moves like that. Now, my number 6, we have Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman comes into the title character, and man, oh man, every time I rewatch this now, it kills me. The music, the soundtrack, the score, all of that, perfection. But the thing I love about Black Panther so much is the way that it built up Wakanda as a world, as a character of its own. Look at all the title characters, the side characters that really much add so much to this world. Wakanda is one of the coolest locations that the MCU has ever introduced. The fact that Ryan Coogler was able to really much develop that all and give us such a substantial world that we already thought we knew, but now we are rethinking the entire MCU all over again. That is what Black Panther does. Plus, I love the action in here. I know some people have issues with some of the CGI towards the end. I don't care. Black Panther was everything for me. Plus, Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, perfection as well. Now, my number 5, it is Spider-Man: Far From Home. Now, I am very much biased on this movie because I absolutely love Mysterio and Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor. So, the fact that they're bringing in Mysterio into the Spider-Man, and especially in the MCU, it worked wonders for me. The sequences and some of the actions moments with the illusions are top tier MCU, and I would even argue some of the best comic book moments we've ever gotten in a comic book film. Mysterio, for me, though, while I love him, the thing I love about this movie is this very much more is a Peter Parker story going on a school field trip, and he wants to just be with the girl. And I think that dilemma of who Spider-Man is to who Peter Parker is very important and integral to this all. Especially, I think this movie even gets a boost after seeing No Way Home. Because in a sense, this entire Homecoming trilogy has gotten bigger and better and really much separated Peter Parker from all of the other MCU stuff. In each film, it kind of got less and less, but still felt all inclined within this world and how important it is. As well, even just adding in here, Zendaya and Tom Holland's relationship and just the awkwardness of it felt so real. I see myself so much in Tom Holland's Peter Parker, especially when I was in high school, and I can't get enough of Far From Home. It's one of my most rewatched MCU films ever. And at my number 4, we got the final Phase 4 TV show that I love that I haven't talked about yet, and that is Loki, man. Loki was my least anticipated show. I just didn't think we needed any more Loki, and God was I wrong. The way that they explore the multiverse, the way they brought in Sylvie and all these other variants and explored that whole topic, and now I can't wait to see what Multiverse of Madness brings us because of all that. Owen Wilson was such a big standout, but the thing about this movie is the emotional core Loki brings to the entire concept. I was so thoroughly impressed to see how they were able to handle this entire concept, as well as diving into the characters even deeper. I love Loki so much now, as more as a character than I ever thought I would before, and this is why these shows are so important, because it develops these characters in such a spectacular way. My number 3, we have Avengers Endgame. What else is there to say? This was the giant conclusion to the whole entire Infinity Saga, working as a great movie, and I didn't even get to mention this on Far From Home. I love how great of an epilogue that is to this movie. Avengers Endgame has actually grown on me even more and more on rewatches. I loved it at first, even though I thought there were a couple too many plot conveniences and even some slower pacings, but even then, I go back and rewatch this movie and I'm like, this is one of the most defining films, really much that just shows that this whole branching of different films can work, and Endgame hits it. The first act is an epilogue to Infinity War. The second act is kicking off what we are supposed to do as heroes to save this, and really much developing Captain America and Iron Man till their very end, giving us an ending on that emotional death of Black Widow. And then when we get to the third act, the last hour is pretty much just a giant comic book nerds galore of amazing Easter eggs and fan reactions and everything fans have been wanting to see for so long. But it worked because of how the story was, and that last hour, that last action sequence, I don't know if anything will ever top that when it comes down to a comic book property and giving us a final battle. Holy shit, I haven't been that on the edge of my seat since Return of the King, and that's saying a lot. My number 2, this was my favorite MCU film for so long, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I love this movie. It's the MCU movie I've hands down rewatched the most. It's one of the ones I've seen the most in theaters as well. I love James Gunn's directing and writing in this. The music, what else is there to say, is stunning, and surprisingly enough, my favorite moment in the film is actually the one between Gamora and Star-Lord when they're listening to the music, sitting there about to kiss, and, doesn't work out in that way. For me, though, the humor is perfectly placed in here. The characters are amazing. I grew up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, so getting to see Rocket, Groot, Star-Lord, Drax, and Gamora all come to life was also freaking awesome. Added more to the cosmic realm of the MCU, our first time out there, learning who Thanos is, learning who Ronan the Accuser is, all sorts of things like that, and even introducing more about the Infinity Stones. This is a great setup movie, but as well as just a fantastic movie that explores all these different characters that we never met before, but explores them to their emotional core in such a spectacular way. As well, the movie is gorgeous. It's just, again, one of the most rewatchable, one of the most entertaining, and one of my favorite MCU films, and just in general, one of my favorite comic book films of all time, because it just brought everything I love about the Guardians to life and expanded on that in so many different ways. But we're at my number 1. And some of you guys might be like, well, Zach, this movie just came out. How can you say that? And, maybe it changes. That's how MCU rankings work. But right now, where I'm at right now, with my biasness, this is hands down one of my favorite comic book movies, one of my favorite comic book experiences, and one of my favorite movies I've seen in my entire life. Flat out, Spider-Man No Way Home is the Spider-Man story that I've wanted to see for so long. And it's not just because of the MCU, even though this is the Peter Parker story, I'm really happy they finally got to tell, but also because of all the nostalgic and Easter eggs. It all worked. All my worries about those, it weaved in organically in such a fresh way that it was so beautifully and touching. It's tough to talk because I don't want to get into spoilers on this because I know a lot of you guys have still not seen No Way Home. Some of you guys might not be able to see it for a while. So I'm going to stay pretty vague with this besides my other videos that I've talked about. There's a lot in this movie and there's a lot to love. And I think the first act, while pacing is very fast-paced and I wish they would have taken their time maybe a little bit more with it, I love how much this movie was really able to develop all these different characters and more, and in general give these villains more to love about each and every one of them, especially Willem Dafoe's performance, which is absolutely scary and intense. The action here is brutal and visceral. It's emotional. I get goosebumps, shaking. I've seen the film 3 times at this point, and I can't wait to see it again. I love this movie. I love it. I have nothing else to say. And God, the ending. The ending is freaking perfect. Even though I cried like a little bitch through the entire way through. So freaking good, and bravo to John Watts, and bravo to Tom Holland on his excellent performance in this movie. Easily his best one yet. And that's my MCU ranking so far from worst to best. What a fantastic year. I actually argue that this might be the strongest MCU Phase 4 yet. We're looking forward to next year, though, because we got a lot of big properties coming. Thank you once again, guys, for watching this. Again, hit that like and subscribe button, comment down below your guys' ranking, and of course, until next time, stay classy.